Thank you so much for joining us today. This session will be recorded, so please hit continue as you see that button pop up on your screen. In the next, we ask everybody to please take a moment and follow the instructions that will be up on the screen in just a moment to participate in our Mentimeter poll. Answers to the question will appear anonymously as they are submitted. And additionally, if you have questions at any time throughout the hour, please post those in the Q&A, and we will answer as many as possible as time allows.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this special session with ARTivist Mark Phi to discuss his 46 Pleas painting and accompanying docuseries depicting George Floyd's last words. During this time, we will also hear from our Dean, Don Pope Davis, as he engages Mark in a Q&A. Thank you to the team in EDGE, Dr. Carlotta Penn, Ryan Randall, Jenna Azute, Austin McClellan, and Neil McKinney for making today possible. Little did we know when the Dean began talking with Mark almost a year ago that his visit with us would occur during the Chauvin trial and a day after the subsequent guilty verdict. This webinar is even more poignant for many of us after the events of yesterday, including yet another police killing of Ma'Khia Bryant right here in Columbus. In keeping with the Dean's appreciation and support of the arts and our college commitment to racial justice and equity, Mark Phi is in talks with EHE to provide his painting and docuseries a permanent home here in EHE. Mark's desire is to offer art and imagery as a reflective tool for discussion and action related to racial justice. We look forward to inviting Mark back to EHE during the next academic year once those discussions are finalized. Before we move forward, we want to caution that there is sensitive material during the webinar. Mark Phi utilizes actual audio of George Floyd. So thank you for all of you if you were able to participate in our Mentimeter question. And one of the questions we asked was, what is the role of art in racial justice activism? And so let us pause for a few minutes and have you answer that question.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an interesting journey from the conversations we first started with Dr. Pope Davis and yourself, Dr. Arnold. Really appreciate the opportunity to have my work, presented here, and for everyone on the team that has helped to put this together. So I think that art has a role in just moving people. I think it has a role in changing our perspective. I think it gives voice to the voiceless. I think it also allows us to, as an artist, to say things that people are feeling and may not necessarily know how to express it. And, for this piece around the George Floyd, came out of inside of me, my core. And so being able to have something like that presented and created and received, and to be able to put it out to the world, and to share that perspective and to see how it's received, and hopefully change people's hearts and minds, which is the end goal of the work that I do. I think that art plays a big role in that. Art is media. It's not just paintings. It's the movies we watch. It's the plays we go to. It's the music we listen to, and all those things connect and bring us all together. So it has a very powerful effect on us and a unifying effect. And I think art has its place clearly in the fight for racial justice. So
Thank you so much for offering that. And as you can see from the screen to our participants and to Mark, is that many of our participants resonated with what you actually said. Some of their responses are coming up as well. about what they feel is the importance of racial justice activism and the role that art actually plays in that. And one thing that you did not mention, but is very powerful as we see from the screen, is that art is power, expression, and can reach people without speaking. And I think I would like to just tell the audience that that's one of the things that Mark has brought up, even in conversations that we've had with him about the usage of imagery as a form of expression and the role that it can play in reflection, but also the role that it can play in actually eliciting action on that part. So thank you so much for just that initial conversation around this.
No problem. Thank you.
So let me turn right now and introduce our artist today. Mark Phi is an international, and as he self-describes, artivist and creator. And he really believes that an ideology rooted in the belief that we all have the ability to create and make an impact on our world. Mark demonstrates this through art philanthropy and art wealth generation. First, through his impact model, he creates art to help organizations across the globe spread awareness about their cause and access financial resources. He holds these organizations accountable by ensuring funds generated from the sale of his art are used to make an impact on the lives of those in need. Secondly, he uses art as an asset class for wealth generation and store of value for art connoisseurs, enthusiasts, collectors, and investors, consciously preserving the value of art. And he is very deliberate about appreciating its value over time. Mark established Mark Phi Creations as a social business enterprise that spreads the Mark Phi ideology and executes the impact model internationally, demonstrating to others that we can make an impact on the lives of others while benefiting. Through creation, we make an impact. So during this next portion of our time, we are going to play a few clips in which Mark talks about the impact the George Floyd murder had on him, racism in America, his own background, and he'll also share a perspective about Black people's place in the world. These were all inspirations in the creation of his 46 Pleas painting depicting George Floyd's last words pleading for his life. Our Dean, Don Pope Davis, will also lead a question and answer during the time between the clips. And also, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And if there is time, the Dean will actually pose a few of your questions for the artist.
Please. Please, I can't breathe. Please, man. Please, man. I can't breathe. I've been trying to hear about it.
Today is June 20th. Really what's prompted this recording, which is one of the first times I'm actually doing something like this, is the incident with George Floyd. And watching that video really had a big impact on me. And of course, we all know about the riots and protests and all the different words that have been used to describe how people are responding to what took place and how that has basically taken on a life of its own all over the world. I took some time to really think about what's been going on and wanted to get my thoughts out there and just share them with the world. I thought a good way of doing that is to do that through art. I paint, so I decided to do a piece that really sends a
So Mark, thank you for that introduction and welcome to our community, and giving us a perspective to get this conversation going.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Can you tell us more about your background, who you are, and what experiences have led you to become an artist, an activist around this topic?
Well, so I'm Jamaican by birth, and with a rich Sierra Leone heritage. My great-great-grandfather is a national hero in Sierra Leone. And I've lived here in Sierra Leone and the United States. And so growing up, traveling and living in different parts of the world and seeing how the Black community is impacted and how we live has given me a perspective about being here in America and what that's like. And so the journey to this moment, I don't think I really even understood how deep and how strongly I felt about things until last year. I think being home with the pandemic, being able to sit my thoughts with it for a long time. And then the George Floyd murder was quite significant. But prior to that, even for art was an accident. My background is, I'm an information management consultant by profession. Have done international trade and minerals. I've done a number of other things in my background. And so I didn't really realize I had the talent or ability to paint until very late. So that talent, when I discovered it, my mom said to me that I should use it as a gift. As a gift, and I should use it to help people and to make a difference. And so since then, I've been using my art to try to figure out how to help people. And so the George Floyd incident last year was triggering, I think triggering for all of us. And so out of that, I decided to create, the painting. And I felt like that wasn't enough. And that led into me wanting to do something more. So I think my background and my life experiences living in Jamaica, living here, living in Sierra Leone and London and Shanghai and all those different places, giving me that world perspective. But just seeing how Blacks are in the world has birthed inside of me a desire to find a way to help to empower the Black community towards independence.
So when you think about this in terms of living in these different communities, you clearly have been influenced by the experiences in different cultural communities, living in different places. How has that changed your thinking in relationship to your art?
So I try to put images out that are either uplifting, powerful in terms of the people. I do a lot of portraits. And this piece that I did for George Floyd is actually very different from the rest of the work that I normally do. And so most of the images I try to put out, however, are images of faces that have impacted the world or moved towards change. If it's Martin Luther King, and it's everything not just from an activism perspective, but more from a humanistic perspective and how we are able to make an impact in different areas of our lives or different parts of society through art. And so I try to put images out that project that and place those thoughts in the hearts and minds of people.
So the images, so you're doing your art to stimulate conversations. You're also looking for a reaction for people. Would that be a correct assessment?
I want my art to create impact. At its core. I think conversation is a starting point, but at the end, that the conversation I think is more internal. I want to inspire people from the inside, for them to be able to change how they feel about things, to change how they look at things. I think if you change a person's heart and mind, then you are able to change their behavior. And if you can change their behavior, then you can change our society. And so my hope is that the images that I put out and the conversations that I start and the things that I spark within people, it's going to allow them and move them towards positive change.
So who inspires you? I mean, give us a little, context here of who inspires you to do the work that inspired you to start creating in this way, and given your own history here.
So when I first started, I really was just playing around, and so I'm a huge Bob Marley fan. I talk about it in one of my docuseries episodes, and you know, I'm inspired by him a lot because one, he's Jamaican. The other part is that his music has moved and inspired and motivated so many people all over the world. Bob Marley was also a student of Garvey, Marcus Garvey. And he is definitely one of the people that inspire me because of the message that he came with about, helping Blacks at that time to understand that they were more than slaves. They were more than just the stories that they were given to and passed on to them. And so that is one of the images and the people that still to this day really inspires me. But, from a musical perspective and just the message that's within Bob Marley's music, I'd say he's one of my biggest inspirations. And, happy to say that I have a collection of paintings in the Bob Marley Museum.
Good.
That's
So say a little bit more about how do you decide the medium that you use to create? What's that process like for you?
I most of it comes from inspiration, right? So the medium I use, generally speaking, is just acrylic and on canvas. Um, and I, the way I go about the process, usually it's something that I'm inspired to do. It's usually an image that I want to put out there because I think it's important. Um, and, specifically, for example, in the case of George Floyd, which was very different, it was me thinking, how do I convey the message that I want people to receive? And so I would say that prior to last year, um, I was using my art really in trying to connect with the organizations that I worked with and making sure that I aligned with their message and aligned an image of an individual or hero who would connect with their audience so that the funds could go towards making an impact. And transition that's happened, I think, as a result of last year and seeing the impact that comes out of creating something that is focused squarely on, what I believe and what I think, is definitely shifting the way that I'm going forward with my art and really focusing on creating bodies of work that are going to go out into society to make a really lasting and meaningful change. Very similar to how this particular piece is at this moment extremely relevant. Even though at the time when I created it was relevant, but as time goes on, to understand that it will live on, and people will be able to use it as a reference to understand what happened at this point is extremely powerful. So the medium that I use is, a canvas, and that's it, even that is shifting as now I'm coming in to do more film and working on other projects to use other mediums to project and create, so that that change and impact can be felt.
Thank you for that, Mark. And we will transition and thank you, audience. We'll transition to a few more of clips that the artist has actually provided for us. And so stay tuned.
This thing happened with George Floyd, I felt like I needed to say something. We have all these opinions all the time, and sometimes we share them, and sometimes we feel like we can't do anything. And I went through this phase of just feeling really hopeless. Like, what can I do? And if I do anything, is there going to be any difference that it will really make? And that hopelessness went to, feeling like a coward, because then I started thinking about the options that I had and the things that I could do to make a difference, and think that, okay, some of these things are actually going to have implications on me and my life. I have a daughter that relies on me. I have loved ones. What's going to happen to them if I decide to stand up in the way that I think it's really needed for us to get the kind of change that we need to have. But I do believe that those people, Martin Luther King, he stood up for this kind of stuff. He's dead. They killed him. And many others. When I think about what needs to be done for that change, it makes me feel afraid, because I feel like, man, if I start saying something or trying to be a force that's going to make a difference, how is that going to impact my life, right? Um,
So, Mark, as a follow-up to that piece, something that you said resonated with me, and part of it was that the people, the art you've created, the people that you have visualized for your art, they've all had an impact in our society in some way, shape, or form. And conversely, they have paid a price for that.
Correct.
And so when you talk about these issues of social justice and change, how do you think of your art as fitting into that space, given the commitment you've articulated so far?
Um, I think it's specific to what you're talking about. I don't think it's just across the board for art. I think whenever we start to have conversations about things that are shifting societal quote unquote norms that are norms that need to be changed, right? For example, our criminal justice system in America, or just the place of Blacks in our world and society, and the discrimination that happens. Those things, when you put yourself out there and you're trying to create that change and move it into a space that it's propelled onto the world stage, and people now can identify you and put you in that box, if you will, or put you in that space, I think it exposes you in a certain kind of way. And for me, it's having been a behind the scenes person as Mark Phi, I literally was anonymous until last year. No one knew that I was an artist. And so coming out and doing this for the first time was new. I was scared, but I was compelled. I felt like I had to do something. But I think that in this space, putting the art out and using whatever medium, and it's good, as I said, it's not just paintings, but it's other mediums of dance or music or film. You put yourself, create a target for yourself when you're talking about things that go against the norms of what the people in control may not necessarily want to change.
As a psychologist, I often think about the notion of vulnerability. When you put yourself out there, when you create something, you create a product, because people will have an opinion.
Yes.
People will have an opinion whether you like it or not, and
Right.
so you have to begin to think through what do you hope will happen as a result of this artwork. Because you begin with a certain concept or a certain experience, as you've talked about being grounded in social justice, but someone else may see something entirely different. And so how do you balance that expectation that you have as a creator and the experience that someone may have as a result of what they see you doing, which could be completely different than your own perspective?
And that's the great thing about the human experience. It's interesting, like when you create and you put something out there and someone sees it and they see something that you weren't thinking about, that wasn't in your thought process. I receive it. I think, it's inspiration. I think that's where inspiration comes from. And so if someone can find something else in something that you create that may not necessarily even be the message that you're putting out there, to be able to impact someone in that way is meaningful. And hopefully it's positive. There's a certain energy of positivity and unity that I put behind my work, even within this piece, which is very conflicted. right? And I talk about in the painting, there are two sides of it, right? There's just one side where I'm thinking about things from how do we get unified? How do we end this? How do we change people's hearts and minds? And then there's this activism piece of, man, we have to do something to go get our power back. That almost seems in conflict. But I think people receive the message, in different ways, and I'm open to that. I want them to interpret it the way that they receive it, and hopefully impacts them in a way that's going to move towards positivity or to take action that's going to lead to positive change.
So say a little bit about who you are hoping to influence by your art. What is that? What are you thinking in terms of that? You talked about people having different interpretations, but who do you have in mind as you create this, or are you doing some of this because this is what you feel called to do?
Some of it is called, I think it's more of the latter a little bit now than and as I said, there's a transition that's happening. This is a change, and the George Floyd murder, the timing of it, the pandemic at home, gave me a lot of time to start thinking about how the direction that I'm going to go in. The overarching message for my art is to change the hearts and minds of everyone. I want to impact people. In terms of where I am focused in my energy, it is right now around the Black community, because I don't think we have to look outside of ourselves to get change that we really want to see. I think we have to look internally and be the ones that want to make the change, right? We have to be the ones to internalize where we are and take responsibility. And in doing so, create our own community and empower ourselves, realizing our power, understanding where we came from, understand the power that's inside of us. And with doing so, we'll be able to move towards a better place. And so my energy at this point is focused on trying to communicate with and connect with that community in that way, but also speak to the broader community and understand how, we can't always talk to ourselves. If we want to create change, we have to talk outside of, our communities, because if we want to create a change of people's hearts and minds, you have to be talking to everyone. So some of the art that I'm creating is speaking very specific to certain, groups, but the overarching message is about how do we shift our hearts and minds towards, love and unity.
Let me ask one more questions before we move on that triggered in your response. You have kept throughout our conversation coming back to the killing of George Floyd as a catalyst for you to pivot in this direction and wanting to have an impact. There were other killings before George Floyd. What made that different for you as an artist, that George Floyd's death was the catalyst as opposed to those that happened before? Yeah. And since then, if you will, as well.
Right. I think the work I did before was, as I shared, really working with the organizations and trying to get them to enable them or empower them through, the resources that they get from my art. The George Floyd video, I think, really brought out of me the feelings that I had that I didn't express before, the thoughts I was having when those other, when the other murders happened, where I thought about them and I had my feelings and I shared them with my friends and I speak to people about it. But when I watched that video and everything that was happening at that moment in the world, the protests that were taking place, and I felt like I was sitting on my hands. I literally felt like I was sitting back and not doing anything. And it compelled me and wanted to make me move. One of the things I talk about is, that was a moment. It was a big shift happening, not just here in America, but it was all over the world. And And it was happening all around you. You couldn't turn away from it. But then the pandemic just even accentuated that significantly more so, because people were locked in their homes and were forced to see it. So that moment for me is what pushed me. And then thinking into the future, I'm always thinking about legacy and what do I leave behind? I want to be able to make an impact. I want to be able to create something that's going to leave something that when I'm gone, the same people I'm painting will be able to, someone in the future will say, that guy did something. And my daughter is the person I think about when I think about that. And she's gonna hear about this moment, this collective moment, and she's gonna look at me at one point in the future and ask me, what happened when you were alive that time? What was it like? Just like, you had a parent that was alive during the civil rights movement. You asked them, what did you do? Right? I want to be able to say that I did something, and I'm doing something that's coming truly from deep inside me. And so that's shifted something inside of me significantly. And I think then doing it also shifted something more inside of me, because I think when you have an inspiration or feeling to do something, but then you actually take action, and then you put yourself into it, and then you're pouring yourself into it, and then you're putting yourself out there, it pushes you further. And so I think the activism of it, not just creating the art, but taking the action to create it and to push it out there, also has pushed me in a different direction from how I was operating before.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Again, audience, thank you so much for being a part of this today. And we're going to pause right here for a moment and share a piece of Mark's artwork. And we're just going to take a few minutes in silence for you to contemplate the piece of art that he created. And then we'll come back and we'll have another clip of the docuseries and be able to answer some of the questions that you've placed in the Q&A. And so we hope all of you, while we did not take the full time to examine Mark's painting related to the full time, that it actually took George Floyd to say those words. It's this kind of interaction and being able to pause and reflect about what we're hearing and what we're seeing that I think Mark Phi actually wants to do with his work. Right now, we'll transition and look at our last clip from the docuseries, and then have the Dean actually pose a few of your questions that you've placed in the Q&A.
change that we want to see. We have a war, not just over our physical space. The war that we have to go out there and fight to get that revolution is to change the hearts and minds of people. And the media has a huge role that they play in what happens. And a really good example of that was when coronavirus came out. And for the first time probably in humanity, the entire world came together under one idea to stop something that put them at risk. No matter where you go in the world, they understand wearing a mask and what coronavirus is. And that's because the media was able to communicate that message to everyone all at once. And if they can take that message to protect people and to communicate it so everyone all over the world acts in a singular way, I believe that the media, that same media, has the power to change the hearts and minds of people. They tell you what to be afraid of, and we're all focused on what we're being told to focus on. But I think we have to open our minds, free our minds, start thinking for ourselves, go create our own, use the media as a tool to be able to do that. I believe the media is probably one of the most, if not the most influential tool of what we call the system that needs to play their role in changing the hearts and minds of folks. That's that.
So, Mark, let me ask you a couple of questions that has come up from the participants. One question is, what is your advice to an artist or a new artist in particular wanting to become more of an activist? What advice would you give to someone who's interested in doing that?
Start, start, go create something. Keep creating. I think a big part of it is being confident in what you're doing and being sure of yourself and putting yourself out there. And realizing how important it is to put yourself out there. And so I think it's create and put yourself out there and seek advice. Find someone who you can speak with and who can share with you, but stay true to yourself. I think one of the things I've realized also with my art is that the pieces that really came from within are the pieces that people connect with the most and that create the most impact ultimately. So that would be, just create, start, put yourself out there, get some advice, and be confident about who you are.
How did you go about getting that advice?
So when I started, I didn't have any idea. I didn't even think of myself as an artist when I first started, to be honest. And I wasn't trying to put myself out there. I was actually trying to hide behind Mark Phi. But what I think as time has gone on is I've realized, for example, the reason I'm here today is because of a friend that introduced me to you, Horace Ford. And so the creation of the docuseries, I didn't do it on my own. I have people that came together to help me. My friends, Andre K took a photograph that I've been using all the time. And George Tandy Jr., the artist that created the music behind it. And so I think getting people involved and behind what you're doing is very important to be able to propel your stuff out there. And so for me, it was really believing in what I was doing and sticking with it.
It also sounds like you took a risk. You have to be prepared to take a risk in doing this. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I think you said it earlier.
Yeah.
You talked about putting yourself out there, right? The risk is, people are going to have an opinion about what you're saying, your opinion or your work. And I think that's where your confidence comes in, and sticking with it and keep creating. You believe in what you're doing, love what you're doing, doing from a place of passion, and you believe in what you're doing, you do it, and people will latch on. So but it is a risk, and
Yeah.
but I think it pays off.
Uh,
And-
Here's another question. You reference your medium has been canvas and acrylic and painting the actual heroes. As you think of this presentation, what was your intent of the art pieces, both just in words and music, as well as depictions along in the video? Could you speak to that at all?
For the piece, I wanted, when you read those words, to go back to that moment when you probably saw the video for yourself. Because I don't think, you hear the video and it's one thing, but you don't hear it in this very condensed way. I think this piece gives you a chance to consume everything that happened in a very short period of time. And I think the way that this medium allows you to receive it, even the way that the letters are missing at the end, when someone is not able to breathe, they are speaking and they can't say all the letters, they can't pronounce all of them. And so I think that that's one way that I wanted to connect with people with the piece, and for them to get that emotion again, and for that to live on, and for it to be there as an artifact of this happened, right? This is a moment in time, and it was documented. And a big part of who I am now is, as a community, Black community, is making sure that we capture our content and we tell our stories. And we tell it from our perspective, and we talk about it, we express it in the ways that we see it, and not allow someone else to always tell our stories and own it. I think that's important. So that medium of the painting was one way of doing that. And then the docuseries really came out of me wanting to do more, and felt like, okay, I have a lot to say about this thing that happened that inspired it. Let me put some words to it and put my face out there and let people see it. And so I also hope that it will enable other people and give others the permission to do something. One of the things that I felt when I was, before everything, that I felt helpless and hopeless. I'm like, what the heck could I do that's going to make any material change, right? What is it that I could possibly do, right? I don't have anything. I don't have any, major, resources to go throw at this, or any power to go change the system, right? I'm not in the political process. I'm not, there's a senator or congressman. What can I do, right? And so it made me think about that and figure out, okay, I can start with what I have, and everyone else can start with what they have. And if we all do our little part and we all use what we have, it might be your voice. In this case, this is just my voice. Most of this was just me taking a camera, sticking it in front of me, recording it, sometimes I edit it and put it out to the world. And here we are. And I wanted it to go as far as possible, right? And for it to also be, and I've used this word continually, institutionalized. And so having it be a part of Ohio State University is huge, because I feel like this continues. People pass away and they go on, but institutions live on forever, right? They live on for a lot longer. And so I feel like this is the way to carry on that work, and the message behind it, which is change in the hearts and minds of people, ultimately towards, love and unity. I hope that that message will continue, and people will know that this came out of that moment that happened in 2020 when George Floyd was killed. These are his words, but this is not where it ends. We can move towards something that's bigger than us, and that's going to change our society ultimately. And hopefully this will spark something in one person. This takes one person. So start where you are, do what you can.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
So most people recognize around the world today the image of George Floyd because of that moment. Will you consider doing an image of him and keeping with the style images of the heroes that you have painted? Are you thinking of transforming that image in some way?
So I've started a new project that kind of came out of this one, and it's taken up all of my time, where I can't even get in front of a canvas anymore, it seems like. But I think if I'm inspired to do so, I think most of the work I do comes from inspiration. It's not just about, okay, this is a hot moment, let me try to go do something that's going to capture this moment. But it's a true inspiration. I think the George Floyd moment, right, was a tipping point for a bigger thing, right? And so I look at his life as a catalyst for why we're here today, right? And even the outcome of the verdict from yesterday, right, is it's bigger than Derek Chauvin, right? I don't think by any stretch that is justice. I think it's accountability, which is a step in the right direction. But I think that you know, I create from a space of inspiration, and I want that inspiration to be able to make a lasting impact. And so I think, you know, there are probably millions of paintings of George Floyd out there. I think I don't know if mine would make would make another, you know, another dent, but I think capturing his words was really powerful because it speaks to, I think, what anyone can connect with.
Well, we think your work is unique. You may not think you're there yet with the thousands of images. And so the format and the style that you've taken, again, with some of the heroes of people committed to social justice is unique. And so, you know, I want to encourage you to continue to do that in that vein.
I appreciate it, and I am. So I'll take this opportunity to talk about briefly just, you know, another project I've started as a result. And this project literally came out of this George Floyd moment. So George Floyd led me back to Garvey, Marcus Garvey, which is a Jamaican national hero. Garvey's message of, you know, Pan-Africanism and unity and all of those things. And that message led me back to our national heroes in Jamaica. And so now I'm producing a project to revive and modernize the portrayal of Jamaica's national heroes, which is a multidimensional project to recreate their paintings, the images of the heroes, and I'm also creating a 10-episode docuseries to be distributed to the world so people can understand the contribution that Jamaica's national heroes not only made in Jamaica, but how they impacted the rest of the world. So JamaicanNationalHeroes.com, people can have a chance to go check it out and see the images, see what we're doing there. But that was birthed out of this. And that's why when you're asking me earlier about this new place, it is a new place, but it's a new place that's shifting and allowing me to be very deliberate and intentional about the work I create, because I'm realizing how much impact it can have in changing people and changing, you know, impacting our communities I spoke to as well. And so going back home and being able to do that from home out to the world is where my current laser focus is.
Thank you so much, Mark. Excuse me, Dean Pope.
No. I was going to say, so thank you.
We had two more questions, but one of the questions that actually popped up while you were talking and the Dean was looking at his notes was how we plan to use this art piece at OSU and what kind of relationship we're hoping to have. And so you alluded in your answers to what you hope your work will do. Mm-hmm. And so if we if I can just add what we hope, perhaps an installation of your art in our college might do for our college. One thing I think I mentioned, you know, perhaps right as people were logging on, is that we have a commitment to the arts in the college, but we also very much resonate with your message that you want to use art and imagery to actually spark conversations and to actually have art not be this untouchable thing, but be able to actually be used and discussed and reflected upon, not just about the George Floyd moment, but for other issues. And so that's how we perhaps want to use your art in our college. We're always looking for tools that actually help people reflect and help people discuss and help people plan around things for action as well. And so that's what we hope potentially that your artwork can do. Certainly having students be able to interact with art in a way that sparks their own conversations, certainly our faculty, our staff, and also different people across the university community. Being able to have this kind of piece be associated with our college and some of the conversations that we are having around issues of racial justice and equity. I appreciate you talking about just your work with Jamaica. One piece of our college is also internationalization, and we're always looking at comparative views of racial justice and equity. And so this is another thing that I think a type of relationship and engagement with you and with your art can actually inform the work that we're doing in our college. One more question that we had from someone, and I think it's an awesome question that we'll have as a last question, and then we'll move into our next Mentimeter. And thank you to the audience for participating in those Mentimeters. They're not just fun things to do during a webinar. They also give us a little bit of feedback for how you're experiencing these webinars in real time, even though you will receive an email that has a link to a survey after this. But this last question, Mark, was if you could collaborate with any other artist of any genre or type of art, who are some artists you'd like to work with, who could enhance your art and whose art you could also enhance? And I think that's a very awesome question. And so take it away.
Oh man, somebody doesn't like me here. That's a tough one. That's a really tough question. I would say that connecting with other artists and individuals who are who have a mission and a purpose behind what they want to do, and aligns ideology, with the ideology of creating impact, are individuals I would consider. I don't think I've ever sat down and thought about that question. That's why it's hard for me to just kind of nail in on a person. But I could give the characteristics of that person, if that gives perspective. So I would love to collaborate with someone who wants to have a global impact, right? A positive message, a unifying message, a message that is going to allow us to move collectively as humanity towards, compassion towards each other, love for one another, and empathy, right, is one of those things that we need more of, right? I think, we think about the things that we do, and we're so caught up sometimes in the laws or what you're supposed to do, but empathy just plays such a big role in just how we treat each other. So, people that share that message and share that ideology and share that focus on bringing that together are people, the kind of artists that I would want to work with and the types of projects I would love to get engaged with. So that I'm trying to think of, like, Bob Marley was alive, he'd be perfect. But
yeah, sorry to put you on the spot there.
But that was, but that's like that's what I'll think about that one for the next time. Yes. I'll be ready for the next time.
Yes, no worries. And while the Mentimeter is coming up, I will say that in your docuseries, we noticed a lot of music and jazz playing behind you, and that's one of our dean's sort of personal favorites that he plays in his office, anything jazz or classical. So yeah, you're already doing that in some ways. So our next Mentimeter question is, what are you taking away from today's conversation? And so we'll just pause right there as you answer the question. So while that is coming up, I want to, again, thank our audience and thank you for participating in the Mentimeter. One of the things that has come up is that art is an incredibly powerful tool, and we certainly think so too, which is why we asked our ARTivist Mark Phi to join us today. Just a few wrap up. And keep them coming. We see some answers are still popping up right now, and we'll leave that up. Also, if you don't log off immediately, we were going to just share a screen of some of Mark Phi's other artwork. But as you can see also on his background, he has his Instagram site up there, and we will also share a screen that shows some of the additional artwork that he has done. And so in your spare time, if you want to go to either of those, and some really powerful images for you to interact with as well. And now I'll turn it over to Ryan Randall, and she'll give us a couple of wrap up sort of words.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Arnold. I appreciate it. Well, the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Global Engagement would like to thank ARTivist Mark Phi for sharing his body of work with the university, our surrounding local and national communities. Your 46 Please artwork visually encapsulates the gravity of that moment we all witnessed on May 25th of 2020. With the verdict announced yesterday, this was just the beginning of our quest for justice, equity, and, as we have heard throughout this discussion, accountability. So thank you again for your powerful artwork and activism. And also, we'd like to thank the audience for joining us today as we discuss the important role art plays in activism and how artists just around the country inspire a lot of these communities that are facing issues of injustices and having issues with being treated equitably. I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce that right, but equal treatment, I'll say that. Also, we hope that this meaningful dialogue will continue even past this webinar. Also, if you're interested in viewing The Conflicted Coward, please visit Mark's website at markphycreations.com. And just before we conclude, I also wanted to share a quote that W.E.B. Du Bois said, begin with art, because art tries to take us outside ourselves. It is a matter of trying to create an atmosphere and context so conversation can flow back and forth and we can be influenced by each other. So I definitely think that your artwork has allowed for those conversations as we were having today to flow back and forth, and also to help not just influence each other, but inspire each other, and also to share just our life experiences. And a lot of times art can help that way. So thank you so much. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to make sure I mention George Tandy Jr., who contributed the music to the project. I came in to do the last 2 episodes. So a lot of people, came together to make this happen and support it. I want to thank all of those people that came on, logged on, and everybody that liked and shared the docuseries. And, I really appreciate you guys having me. Thank you, Dr. Pope Davis, Dr. Arnold, Jenna, Ryan, Neil, wherever he is. for putting this together. Really appreciate it and look forward to working with you guys, as we go forward.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon to our audience.
Thank you.